Hi guys, it's me. Welcome to Robin Hood Diaries. I'm glad you could join me this evening. As previewed, I always say this, as previewed, as promoted. Tonight, Carol Burnett and Company something. Yeah. So let's go there. Carol Burnett, 1976 in Me. So to start Carol Burnett and Company story, we have to put it in the context of Liz. Liz was my mother, forced to be reckoned with. So putting that into context that is essential to the story, like totally, um, my mom basically dictated fashion in Beverly Hills throughout the 60s, from 60, 61 until 70, 71, when she moved to Bullocks, Wilshire. She was the fashion director for Saks Fifth Avenue. So that was throughout the whole 60s. She did like Marilyn Monroe's fittings for her summer wardrobe. And she told me that later in life. I'm like, what? You failed to mention that one? My mom knew a lot of people, Women's Wear Daily type lady, knew a lot of people in fashion, a lot of people in makeup and hair. George Masters, she would go to work, and of course, everything is an editorial, and the Saks staff would do her, get her ready every morning and whatever. This is a woman that went into labor. Well, no, she went into a scheduled cesarean, fully made up, makeup, George Masters, the whole hair, lingerie, knocked her out. What am I doing talking about this? Anyway, she was in and out of that maternity ward, decked out, like not a lash out of place. So that's the context of my mom. She also knew at the time in the 70s, when she was transitioning from fashion into film production, or commercial film production, not movies. And that was a real niche. And that extended to variety shows and television in general. So it was basically fashion to TV. So, in and around that time in the 70s, being a mother, the type of woman that she was, not this applies to everybody, many of her form of entity had a lot of gay friends, a lot of gay male friends. And it was strangely open, like in a different kind of way in the 70s. It was kind of like accepted in a much different way than it is now. Strangely enough, 50 years ago or whatever. So it was common for people like my mother to have gay friends, upscale gay friends, fashion industry, film and television. Many of them, or some of them, were dancers. Dancers like on variety shows. Dancers on variety shows basically were dancers that doubled as extras. So when you see a variety show and there's like four people in the background during a skit, they're being extras, but basically they have to be able to break out in full dance mode at any moment. So dancer, whatever he was. And very open kind of lifestyle, actually. Lived with his boyfriend. Oh my God, the apartment, like all like white wicker and like, like ferns and stuff. And lots of porcelain and overstuffed couches. Anyway, so he and his boyfriend, Chris, was the dancer guy, actually lived right across from us. I used to live across from Beverly Hills High School in a fourplex, and they were across the way. So this dancer friend and his boyfriend Chris, who lived in Beverly Hills right next to us, worked on the Carol Burnett show. Now, I was like massive, massive, massive Carol Burnett fan. Carol Burnett at the time was the biggest thing going on television. Yeah, there was, Mary Tyler Moore Show and a few others, hugely popular. But Carol Burnett show was it. Like, that's what you waited for, some of us, all week, was the Carol Burnett show. Who was guesting, and of course all the regulars, Harvey Korman, Tim Conway, and Vickie Lawrence, I'll tell you about later. Being a huge fan, and my mom being, a high profile, whatever the hell she was, she knew, of course, Chris, the dancer, who also happened to work on the Carol Burnett show as those kind of extra / super dancers. So knowing that I was such a huge fan of like the character Miss Wiggins, and I don't know if you have to Google it. I can't, I don't know, encapsulate Carol Burnett and her show. And she was on other shows and television, and then she was on stage, and so she hit the mother lode with this show. Lots of people worship the show, and like with foaming at the mouth. And so I was, of course, big surprise. Liz's son is a big fan of Carol Burnett. Liz knows everybody and their mother, and their mother's mother. So I get an invite, I get an invite to a dress rehearsal of the Carol Burnett show. Not in the audience where she calls out and answers questions. At the dress rehearsal, front friggin' row. There's hardly anybody sitting in seats, but people were everywhere. So I'm invited to this dress rehearsal, and first of all I remember is sitting down, and they're just being rolling sets everywhere, rolling, like this skit, roll out the park, roll in the living room, spin it and roll it. And that was new to me. I hadn't done episodic television yet. And the guest on that show, oh my God, for that week was Lena Zavaroni. Lena Zavaroni was something to behold, and I know you're probably still alive, and God bless you and everything, but Lena Zavaroni was this weird, not weird, but very unusual scenario by which this girl became like this huge overnight sensation as a vocalist. I don't know, she was like 13 or something or whatever, but for 5 minutes, 3 days, she was like the hottest thing going. She was on variety shows and like YouTube her. It's very unusual, especially that she was guesting this show. That's how bizarre it is that she was this really bizarre overnight something or other that came out of nowhere, and suddenly she's guesting the Carol Burnett show. That in and of itself, being a 9-year-old seeing this 13-year-old doing skits with Tim Conway right in front of me on these rolling sets, was, Lena Zavaroni, that should be me. Even though I'm 9-year-old boy sitting in the front row, there's lots you don't know about the 9-year-old. So I actually was asked to do Carol Burnett at a club called the Queen Mary years and years and years later, when I was hard up and I tried my hand at drag at the Queen Mary, and they wanted me to do Carol Burnett, which I was thrilled about, but they said they needed a Joan Rivers impersonator to do both. I was not Joan Rivers. I was Carol Burnett. I was no Joan Rivers. I was so, look at this. Joan Rivers? As Ed the Horse? So anyway, I'm at this dress rehearsal, and the sets are rolling around, and I see Chris, the dancer, of course, up there with Carol and Tim Conway. No, Tim Conway was with Lena Zavaroni. She was with Vickie Lawrence. And they were, I don't know, in the middle of all the rolling sets and everything. There's Chris, the dancer friend. And actually, there's Chris, the dancer friend that actually of my mother's that took my Ken doll once, which horrified me, took it with a Sharpie and drew sideburns and a beauty mark, Butch Queen, whatever. I was horrified. I was like, what, 8? So I'm at this thing, and I see Chris talking to Carol Burnett on the stage, me being there as guest, Liz bringing me, blah, blah, blah. And so they're whispering, and then she looks over at me, Carol Burnett, and one of her expressions where you can't really read if she's mad or funny or whatever, and she flips me this look, and then she starts kind of barging over around the stage to get down and over to me, not marching, but walking with lots of driven determination to the end of the stage with her eyes on me. And at this point, being about 9, freshly 9, 76, I don't know what to make of this. And she comes barging over to me and grabs my head and starts smooching me all over my face. Whoa. being a fan, being such a fan of the Carol Burnett show. I mean, I was, Chris, anything you want. I mean, you arrange this, Mr. Dancer Man. You know, you're God. She's smooching on me. She's sitting to my left, and she's talking to me. Hi. So, once I, recover from that, you sitting to my left, asking me questions, at that point, I'm like completely short circuited. And I have to watch this skit of Lena Zavaroni with Tim Conway that is so obnoxious. Hey, again, like I said, you're probably alive, no offense, but it was just really weird and not funny and bizarre, but supposed to be funny. Tim Conway, of course, it was funny to that extent. So that's kind of the Carol Burnett thing. I remember, I guess in closing, I shot a movie called Fun with Dick and Jane, where I played Jane Fonda and George Siegel's son. And it was in the suburban area that had just been built in the 70s. And basically we shot the whole movie there, in that house, at that house, in front of that house. And I was 10, I think. So this was like a year later. And lots of celebrities visited the set in this home. But I discovered Vickie Lawrence of the Carol Burnett show, her home is across from where we've been shooting all this time. And I see her come out, big, red hair and everything, going to her car in the driveway. And it's like one of those moments where you act before you think. And I literally like kind of darted over to her as if kind of like we were not like she should remember me. And I just basically identified myself. I was there, and it was Lena Zavaroni. And you remember the kid? I'm sure, it's like certifiable little 10-year-old here. So, and don't get me, I should do a whole show on Fun with Dick and Jane. That's a good idea. Anyway, so, I don't know. I hope I delivered on Carol Burnett tonight. I think I did. Pretty close call. Brush with Carol. Miss Burnett. And that's about it for tonight. I've got a counter lined up full of shows. I don't know. I have to get somebody in here for a 6-degree separation chat because I just keep blabbing and blabbing every day. So I'm going to work on that. I got a few pieces of paper on my counter also for that. Okay. Thanks for joining me. As always, I'm sure you're bored stiff hearing how much you mean to me, and that's the highlight of my day. And I adore you for sharing that with me. Okay. So I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.